I do appreciate a series like this very much. I think apologetics is absolutely essential to the Christian arsenal. And maybe not everyone feels that way. A lot of folks who maybe grew up in the church they're already cemented in what they believe, and that's great. But more and more, I feel like Christians are viewed as not smart, people who just need a crutch to lean on, or those are the people that say, I'm praying for you. Those are the people that go to worship on Sunday. But Christianity, as you know, is not that way at all. Christianity is for the thinker. It is not for the mindless person. And I kind of mentioned this briefly last night at the end of that talk. I am concerned about the next generation. And my kids are now soon to be 21 and 19. And as little kids growing up in the church, we fed them, we stuffed them with Bible facts. My kids from a very small age could tell you the books of the Bible and the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 apostles and all these neat little facts. And if there was a Bible bowl, they would probably whoop up on most adults. But once they got into high school, I volunteered to teach the high school class, and I don't think that excited them very much. But I had a definite purpose behind that because I was going to use 4 years to hit them with apologetics. And I bought videos. We spent weeks on videos similar to Brother Murray's lesson last night that just went through God's creation and said, look how magnificent these animals are. Look at the intelligent design in these animals, far beyond chance. Wouldn't one logically conclude there's a designer? And I fed them. We spent a lot of time on the big three: the existence of God, the inspiration of the Bible, and the deity of Jesus. Because I knew I couldn't afford to send them to some Christian private school. They were going to go into the devil's den, and they were going to get fed error and lies and garbage. And I did not want them to come out of that faithless. And so seminars like this, I'm glad my son Joel's here. He's probably the youngest guy in the room. I might be the second. I don't know. We're all solid in our faith, aren't we? We're here because we love God. We love the Bible. And we love to tell the story. We can hear it over and over again. And we need to hear it over and over again because we know what we believe, but sometimes we forget the why. I was convinced a couple of years ago that's true, but why did I believe that? It's good to go over it again and again and again and really become more and more solid in our faith. So, did Jesus rise from the dead? That's a big one. Christianity stands or falls on this question. In Mark chapter 16 and verse 2, it tells us on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, the tomb was empty. So now we got to put on our Columbo hat and figure out what happened. What happened? In John 20, verses 19, and couple that with verse 26, it tells us the disciples were gathered on the first day of the week. And many scholars believe those disciples began to gather on the first day of the week before Acts 2, because Jesus rose on the first day of the week. In Acts chapter 2 and verse 1, it tells us the disciples were together again on the day of Pentecost. Now, likely, being Israelites, Jews, they were gathered because it was Pentecost, but I think they were gathered for another reason. They had been gathering on the first day of the week. And you can look at Leviticus 23. It talks about the Feast of Weeks, which lasted 7 weeks. And then 50 days after the last Sabbath, which would have been a Sunday, that's the day of Pentecost. Pentecost always fell on Sunday, the first day of the week. We quote from Acts 20 and verse 7 quite a bit. After the Lord's Supper, we quote from 1 Corinthians 16:2 quite a bit with reference to giving. But in both of those passages, it tells us that the church was meeting on the first day of the week to break bread. Paul says also you should give on that day as well. Revelation 1 and verse 10 indicates that the church began to call the first day of the week the Lord's Day. The Lord's Day. And if you read the early church fathers of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd centuries, they will tell you the church met every Sunday to celebrate. The reason they met on Sunday was to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. Now, on the first day of the week, the chief thing they did was take the Lord's Supper. And that is a remembrance of the death of Jesus, not the resurrection. The Lord's Supper is about the death of Jesus, and we remember the body and the blood. But why on Sunday? Because that's the day Jesus rose. And I can't think of anything. Maybe you can. I know Israelite history is just rich in tradition for many, many, many years. But what continues today that's anything like the church meeting on Sunday and taking the Lord's Supper every Sunday to remember Jesus? We have annual holidays, we have annual anniversaries and birthdays. But is there anything in this world that people do every single week that compares to the significance of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus? I can't think of anything. And I see members of the church who they're there on Sunday, one foot in the grave. They don't care. We have one sweet sister at South Hills. Her name's Margie Miller. And Margie is advanced in age. But she comes on Sunday and we say, Margie, you know, we stream this on Facebook. You don't have to come if you feel vulnerable with all this COVID stuff. We've been telling her that for weeks. And she says, Jim, at my age, if the Lord wants to take me, he can just take me. I'm going to be right here. And she is every single week. There are a number of objections that people have when it comes to the church and when it comes to Christianity. And you could probably rattle off a longer list than the short one I'm going to give you here. But here are a few objections I hear a lot to Christianity and the church. There's too much pain and suffering in the world. And I just can't believe that if there's an all-powerful, all-benevolent God, that would be the case. So, not interested. People commonly say there's too many hypocrites in the church. To which I say, yep, welcome. Come on in, right? Are you shocked to go to a hospital and find sick people? Come to the church. We're all just trying our best. Objection number 3, I'll say, people commonly say, I just can't believe in God, a God who would send people to hell. That's a problem for me. I don't see that as something I want to believe in. There are too many church scandals, too many church injustices over the many, many years the church has been in existence, and that bothers me. Some might say they might say you Christians are so exclusive. You think you got the only right way. And that bothers a lot of folks too. And while all of these are very real concerns and common concerns people have, and they deserve answers, I want to say this. If Jesus rose from the dead, then that means there must be answers to those questions. That's how important the resurrection is from The resurrection of Jesus from the dead is to our faith and everything we believe. So, this afternoon, very quickly, we're going to look at 7 reasons why I believe in the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Number 1, Jesus' own testimony. His own testimony. Jesus openly spoke about what would happen. That the Son of Man must suffer many things and be killed, and on the 3rd day rise again. It is said in those exact words in Mark 8:31. If you'll follow with me, I just want to read a couple of passages from Matthew. First one in Matthew 17. Jesus says things that might not be quite as clear, like, as Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days, so will the Son of Man be in the belly of the earth for 3 days. And people might have scratched their head and say, what's he talking about? Is he going to go on a cave expedition soon? What's he talking about? We look back and we know what he was talking about. This temple will be destroyed and rebuilt in 3 days. What's he talking about? This he said, the writers of Scripture inform us, about himself. But in addition to those semi-cryptic comments, Matthew 17, beginning in verse 22, while they were staying in Galilee, Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and on the 3rd day he will rise up. And they were exceedingly sorrowful. That's pretty clear. That's very clear. If you turn over a few more pages, Matthew 26, beginning in verse 59. Matthew 26, 59. Now the chief priests, the elders, and the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, still they found none. But at least 2 false witnesses came forward and said, this fellow said, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. And the high priest arose and said to him, do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you? And Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him, I adjure you by the living God that you tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus said to him, it is as you have said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Whoa. Man, I adjure you. It's like, you're telling me what to do? Let me tell you something. And then the King of Kings speaks. Matthew 27, last one here, Matthew 27, beginning in verse 62. Now on the next day, which followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered together to Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember while he was still alive, how the deceiver said, after 3 days, I will rise. Even the enemies of Jesus picked up on this claim that he would be put to death and 3 days later, he'd be back. Verse 64, therefore command that the tomb be made secure until the 3rd day, lest these disciples come by night, steal him away, and say to the people, he's risen from the dead, so that the last deception is worse than the first. So let's get this very, very clear. Everyone in the political world knew how dangerous Jesus was. They knew their position and their power among the people was threatened. We can't have that. We might have some of those political games going on in our day and age as well. I want Roman soldiers. Not the security guys with the walkie-talkies in a Walmart parking lot. I want Roman soldiers posted at this tomb. We cannot afford to have that body disappear. Do you understand what I'm saying? Aye, aye, sir. So, what a bold claim. Jesus says, while he's alive, I'm going to die and I'll rise from the dead. Has anyone made a bolder claim than that? In the history of the world, has anyone made a bolder claim than that? I mean, this is comic book stuff. This is Superman, the death of Superman. Oh, Superman came back from the dead because a little kryptonite got in there. Or not kryptonite, but that crystal, that magic crystal to bring him back. A lot of superheroes die and they come back in the comic books. But Jesus said in John 10, I have the power to lay my life down. John 10:18, and I have the power to take it up again. You better come back from the dead if you're going to say that and have your work and your ministry and your kingdom continue forward. What a bold, bold claim. Now, some have alleged that after Jesus died, his followers, they made up the story of the resurrection. It was kind of a plan B. You've heard this. They expected Jesus to ride into Rome on his noble steed, lop off Caesar's head, take the throne, and establish his kingdom and the good old days of David. That didn't happen. We read the Bible and know that was really not a reasonable expectation. Jesus said plan A was to die and rise from the dead. The people of Jesus' day saw the enemy as Rome, and Jesus saw the enemy as the devil behind Rome and many nations like them. And the last enemy is death. The whole point of Jesus dying was to defeat the last enemy. So here's the beauty of Christianity. It is based in the historic event of the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And he either rose from the dead or he didn't. But it is something we can research and look into and say, is my faith reasonable? I wasn't there. You weren't there. You were not an eyewitness. We'll talk about this in a minute, though. There are many eyewitnesses. Is our faith reasonable? What does the evidence say? Well, reason number 2, the empty tomb. Luke 24 and verse 3 says the disciples could not find the body of Jesus. Well, how convenient, Luke. You know, maybe he's just making that up. Maybe Jesus is in Luke's basement, the body. Luke writes the disciples could not find the body of Jesus. In Matthew 28:13, we're told the enemies of Jesus, they claim the disciples stole the body. The guards are paid, by the way. This is not a very smart plan. By the way, if you've ever, some of you don't know this, I work for the Department of Homeland Security, and I've done thousands and thousands of criminal interviews, and most of those guys are not sharp. They're just not sharp. They pay the guards, here it is, to say the disciples stole the body while we slept. Think about that for a minute. It's kind of like when I was a kid, my parents told me the story of us praying for dinner, the dinner table, and after Dad gave thanks, me telling on my sister, she had her eyes open during the prayer, Dad. Well, how do you know? How did you know that, Jimmy? If the soldiers are sleeping, how are these sleepers witnessing who stole the body? It's not even a coherent statement. There's 4 possibilities. Jesus' enemies stole the body. That doesn't make any sense, because if that's the case, all his enemies would have to do is produce the body to shut up all of these Christians who claim Jesus rose from the dead. Will you guys stop preaching the resurrection of Jesus from the dead? We've got his body right here. We only took it because we were afraid you guys were going to make some monument out of the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea and build some temple on it, and this big movement was going to start, so we stole the body, but here it is. Now you guys can stop. But there was no body to produce. The enemies didn't steal the body. They were going the opposite direction. Option 2, Jesus' friends stole the body. After all, that's what the sleeping witnesses said happened. While this was an early rumor, does it ring true? I ask, does it ring true? Could Jesus' friends, now fishermen were strong guys. I mean, the sons of thunder probably been in a few fights. But are they going to overcome Roman soldiers, trained killers, whose very lives were at stake to defend that tomb? I don't think so. And if there was a scuffle, was anybody scratched? Nobody was killed? That one just doesn't make sense to me either. And then, of course, after stealing the body, they boldly preach to their own death this lie that he rose from the dead. Number 3, option 3, Jesus was not dead. You've probably heard of the swoon theory, which that was later. That was an invention of some guy who couldn't sleep at night and was really trying to think hard. How could Jesus' body and the tomb be empty and the body be gone? And I know. He passed out. They put him in the tomb like an Alfred Hitchcock movie. He ended up really being alive, and after scratching and pushing that tomb open enough, he got out and disappeared forever, like people who claim Elvis is still alive. Michael Jackson's still alive. Jesus just ran off and disappeared, and that's what happened. If you believe that trained Roman soldiers trained to crucify men every day didn't know Jesus was dead, the text clearly says when they saw that he was dead, they didn't break his legs, didn't stop him from shoving a big old spear up into his side, blood and water coming out. I don't know if any credible apologist or even critic of the Bible who still pushes the swoon theory. It's just not credible. Or number 4, Jesus rose from the dead. Now here's how it plays out. Most people, they go backwards in their reasoning and they say, well, option 4 is just not an option. Just take that off the table. There's no way Jesus could have rose from the dead because that's a miraculous thing. And many people who even claim to be Christians, they're naturalists. They don't believe in the supernatural. They don't believe in miracles. They struggle with the virgin birth of Jesus. And I asked this one young man, I said, do you believe there's a God? He said, well, of course. Do you believe that God, with his word, created the universe? I do. But you don't believe in the virgin birth or that he could raise Jesus from the dead? How is this an impossible thing for you to hold on to if you believe in an all-powerful God? It does not make sense to me. But their naturalistic views, as Brother Murray shared last night, leads a Bible school teacher to say, well, they crossed the Reed Sea instead of the Red Sea, and Jesus didn't really feed the 5,000. He passed out some food, taught a lesson on sharing, and then everyone shared their food, and so everyone got fed, and that's how the 5,000 were fed. It's not like the loaves and fish miraculously multiplied. You just sweep everything under the rug. I don't know why they have faith or why they pray at all. Reason number 3, the disciples' transformation. The disciples went, we're told, from hopeless and fearful, Luke 24:21, and John 20 and verse 19. They were fearful, they were hopeless, but they instantly go to confident and bold. Their own explanation for that change was that they had seen the resurrected Lord. And that's why Peter, he stands up in Acts 2 and verse 31 and 32, and he says, we are witnesses of the resurrection of Jesus. Some would say these disciples were crazy. Some would say maybe they were hallucinating individuals. But the problem with that is in line with much of what Jimmy covered about Jesus. Was Jesus crazy? Was he a lunatic? Was he a liar? Does that conclusion fit the bill? Because a lot of these eyewitnesses, they went on and they wrote books, and we have them today. They're in our New Testament. And when you read your New Testament, you just don't get the vibe. Have you ever sat down and talked to a crazy person? Oh. Do you get that feeling when you read Luke, John, Matthew, Mark, any of the New Testament writers, witnesses? Their books are for us to examine even today. They don't come across as gullible either. In fact, they doubted. Remember when the women came and said, his tomb is empty. He's risen. No. They didn't believe him. And of course, Thomas is the standout. Unless I put my fingers in his nail prints, I won't believe. That's Luke 24:11, their initial skepticism. So the disciples' immediate transformation, it's got to count for something. And again, all 7 of these, when you add them up, I think the conclusion is inescapable. But reason number 4, the other witnesses, all the witnesses. All the witnesses. You read 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 6, and Paul kind of says, look, I'm so glad that the gospel we preach to you, you're standing in that now, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And with regard to the resurrection of Jesus, you know how he appeared to a few disciples first, and then he appeared over here, and then he appeared to James and all the other apostles, and he appeared to me, lastly, the least of the apostles. But in between all that, he says in verse 6, he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time. Here it is. Most of them are still alive today. Now, what does that mean? I think it is a risky idea to claim Jesus rose from the dead right after the event when everyone can just go check it out. Just go check it out. You know, a lot of the people mentioned in the New Testament, there are a lot of names given, and we don't have really much description of them. We don't know who they are, but we have their name and their city, and it's given so that the initial readers, if they wanted to, go talk to them. Go talk to her. Here's the book. Here's what happened. Here's the life of Jesus. We all know how he died, how he buried, how he rose, and his resurrection was witnessed by many. There it is. Go check it out. Go check it out. Go examine and let us know if this is true or if this is just a neat little fairy tale we should put to rest. My question, because I not only am I impressed with the witnesses on the side of the resurrection, I'm asking the question, as we look back at history and the documents available, where's the dissenting view? Where are the people, the witnesses on the other side of the story of Jesus? They are nowhere to be found. You know, Jesus claimed to be the Son of God. Jesus claimed to be sinless. The Christian faith is built on this sinless Son of God being a sacrifice for everyone else's sins. But I got a story to tell. Me and Jesus were buddies in high school, and I saw him curse. I saw him cheat on his math test. One time I saw him steal from 7-Eleven, and Jesus did. And where is that? Where are the people to stand up and put Christianity in its place and tucked away forever as a scam, as a scheme, as a sham? Where are the arguments? They're nowhere to be found. They're nowhere to be found. Reason number 5, a growing and thriving church. The church spread and it grew on the power of the testimony that Jesus Christ rose from the dead and now rules and reigns. This is Acts 2 sermon. Now he sits at the right hand of God, ruling and reigning over the church. If you look with me at Acts 26, I'd like to read Acts 26, just a couple verses here. As Paul is before Festus in Acts 26, let's start at verse 19 real quick, get a running start. Therefore, King Agrippa, I was not disobedient to the heavenly vision, but declared first to those in Damascus and in Jerusalem and throughout all the region of Judea, and then to the Gentiles, that they should repent, turn to God, and do works suitable to repentance. I'm going to hit this at the very end of the lesson, but this is why people do not want to believe that Jesus is in charge. They don't want to repent. They don't want this king. Their vote is for somebody else. Verse 21, for these reasons the Jews seized me in the temple and tried to kill me. Having therefore obtained help from God, I continue to this day, witnessing both to small and great, saying no other things than those which the prophets and Moses said would happen. That's this, 23, that the Christ would suffer, that he would be the first to rise from the dead, and would proclaim light to the Jewish people and to the Gentiles. And as he thus made his defense, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, you're beside yourself. That's how Jimmy introduced the lesson. The world thinks we're crazy. Paul, you're beside yourself. Much learning is driving you mad. They knew how educated Paul was, and they thought he stayed up too late at night studying too hard. Paul said, I'm not mad, most noble Festus, but I speak the words of truth and reason. For the king before whom I also speak freely knows these things. For I am convinced that none of these things escapes his attention, since this thing was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know that you believe. And Agrippa said to Paul, you almost persuade me to be a Christian. They didn't have Google. They didn't have Yahoo. They didn't have the internet that Al Gore gave us. But guess what? Everybody knew about Jesus, and everybody knew what happened at Calvary. The word spread about Jesus and what had happened, and the witnesses, as they spread and shared what they saw, the world was starting to believe. And Paul says there is no way you haven't heard of this. If you've been living under a rock, you're a politician. You follow what's happening out in the world. You follow the newspaper, and this was on the front page. Jesus of Nazareth crucified, King of the Jews. Peter said this, we have not followed cunningly devised fables, but we have made known to you the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and we were eyewitnesses of his majesty. Put me to death if that's what you want to do, but that's what I saw. That's what we all saw. Hundreds, thousands of us, even over 500 at one time. At 2 Peter 1:16. You and I have all seen momentum where people get excited over something that's false. And it might last for a little while. It might even last for a long time. I would say evolution is something that has had momentum for a long time. But guess what? The secret's out. Darwin was wrong. You can try to find some other explanation, but Darwin was wrong, not even close. Darwin himself said, if you look in the fossil record, years after I'm dead, the fossil record will show my theory is right. If I'm right, the fossil record will corroborate all that. And it just doesn't. It just doesn't. I might play a round of golf. I wanted to sneak my golf game in here somehow. I might play a round of golf, and for those of you who don't golf, there's 18 holes. For the first 9 holes, man, I'm killing it. Par, birdie, par. Still waiting for that hole in one. And my partners who maybe have never played with me might say, man, you're good. But then they see the back 9. Bogey, double bogey, triple bogey, 9-iron thrown into the pond out of anger. Because over time, my real game is revealed. My real skill level is revealed. Time is such a wonderful thing. Remember, even Nicodemus said, hey guys, just back up. Give it some time. If this thing's not from God, it's going to fall flat. We don't have to jump all over this right now. But the church was growing. The church was thriving. And don't be discouraged by our big buildings and small numbers today. The kingdom of God is everything it always has been. Here's a big one for me. Number 6, it's the conversion of Saul. I cannot explain the conversion of Saul apart from the resurrection of Jesus. In Acts 9 and verse 1, Paul is violently opposing the church, and everybody knows Saul of Tarsus. He's educated. He's very well known. And at this point, he's the ringleader of the church persecutor, and he's dragging people off, men, women, and children, into prison, killing them even. Got his start, though, as an apprentice holding the garments of those who stoned Stephen. Why did one of the most educated men of the first century who hated the church in one night convert? What happened? How could one of the most educated and brilliant men of the first century who hated the church convert to the church overnight? What happened? What could possibly reasonably explain that? Well, if you let Paul speak, he'll tell you. He met the risen Lord. It was the road to Damascus. He tells his story multiple times. Acts 26 being one of them. And not just Paul, but thousands of devout Jews who heard Jesus speak against their temple and get angry at him for so many other reasons, they converted too after the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. How are we going to explain that? Well, the Bible, and Jason did a great job today in his lesson. These are historic documents. Just because it comes out of the Bible doesn't mean it's automatically discounted. Where did you get that? Oh, I got it from the 99-cent store. Oh, well, then it doesn't count. You'd have bought it at Nordstrom, then it would count. This is not the 99-cent store, guys. I shop at the 99-cent store, no offense. But these documents are not less credible. In fact, they're more credible. They're more credible. There's thousands of these when you compare them, as Jason stated, to what we have in antiquity of other writings, of other people that we don't even question. Last point. Reason number 7 is just the witness credibility. Why is Paul credible? What makes a witness credible? Why believe Peter? Why believe John? Why believe Matthew? Why believe Paul? There is power, by the way, in multiple witnesses. And the Jews knew that. Nothing could be established except at the mouth of 2 or 3 or more witnesses. I used to teach interview and interrogation techniques at the law enforcement academy in Glencoe, Georgia. And no, it wasn't waterboarding and slapping people around and turning the heat lamp on. This was interviewing, questioning, teaching officers how to interview and how to question people. And we spent a lot of time talking about observing a person. It wasn't the lie detector test where they're hooked up. This is just them sitting in front of you and you talking to them and trying to skillfully draw the truth out of them and know when they're lying. Now, we don't have any video footage of Paul or Peter. We can't put it on the TV and say, look how sweaty and nervous Paul gets. And, he starts to twitch when he says resurrection. I don't know about that. We don't have that to look at, but we have something far better. We have undisputed historic records that these men died for this proclamation. Not just the apostles, but men and women, Christians, hundreds, thousands of them burned at the stake, fed to the lions, stoned, murdered in their own homes for declaring that Jesus was king, that Jesus lives today, and that Caesar is not king, but Jesus is king. That's why Paul died. That's how the book of Acts ends. The gospel and the great apostle Paul in Rome, preaching this message. Pain and death have a way of getting to the truth. But these folks would not bend. They were all Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's. All of them. All of them. John Piper wrote this. I love this quote. These men's writings do not read like the works of gullible, easily deceived, or deceiving men. Their insights into human nature are profound. Their personal commitment is sober and carefully stated. Their teachings are coherent and do not look like the inventions of unstable men. The moral and spiritual standard is very high, and the lives of these men are totally devoted to the truth and to the honor of God. I'll close with this. It's something I asked last night too. So why do people still not believe? Why do they still refuse to believe? There was a survey in 2017, right around Easter time. Everyone loves Easter and candy and Easter eggs and all that stuff. Do you guys believe in the resurrection of Jesus? 17% said we do. That's 83% saying no. We like having ham and potato salad, and the kids like running around, and Susie gets a new dress and Tommy gets a new shirt and tie, and it's fun time, Easter. 31% of people who claimed they were Christians, 31% said they believe in the resurrection. That means there are 69% of people in this world who say they're Christians, but they don't believe in the resurrection. Those aren't Christians, folks. They've never read 1 Corinthians 15, which says, if Christ has not risen from the dead, our Christianity is in vain. This doesn't count. Throw it out. 57% of people who claim to be Christians and attend a church service at least once a month, they do believe in a resurrection. So, there's a lot of people. What are you? I'm Christian. When was the last time you attended a service? My dad passed away 7 years ago. Oh, no, there was a Christmas play 5 years ago. So, 2015. You guys know that. People who go every now and then, half of them believe in the resurrection, half don't. So, I'm hopeful that the faithful who are constantly in the Word, constantly thinking about these things, constantly scrutinizing the facts, I'm hoping our belief is a little stronger than what we find out in the world. But I will say this. When you read 1 Corinthians 15, there's a problem. There is a problem, and the problem is there are some who say there is no resurrection. And you know why they say there is no resurrection? When you follow the logic, it's because if there is no resurrection from the dead, if Jesus didn't rise, then we're not going to rise, and there's no life after death. And if there's no life after death, then there's no judgment day to worry about. And guess what? Eat, drink, and be merry. That's 1 Corinthians 15. I don't want to believe in the resurrection. I don't want to hear the evidence. I want to eat, drink, and be merry. That's why the very next verse is, do not be deceived, brethren. Evil companions corrupt good morals. I think it's the old King James or the old ESV. It says, evil conversation. The problem was there are some who say there is no resurrection. That is evil messaging, evil conversation. It will corrupt you. It's either Jesus or it's not Jesus. You want to eat, drink, and play? Then make that choice. But you can't have one foot in the church and one foot in the world. Paul said in 2 Corinthians 4, it's the God of this world who's blinded the minds of those who do not believe, lest the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine upon them. If we choose to reject the facts, if we choose to reject the truth, the consequences are great. In fact, Paul said in 2 Thessalonians, if you don't have a love for the truth, God will even send you a strong delusion that you should believe a lie. Once you reject truth, you're lost out there. You're lost out there. You've shut the door to truth. God might even allow you to believe a lie. I hope as Christians, we think critically and carefully about these things because we have to be ready to give an answer. Sanctify the Lord in your hearts and be ready to give an answer to everyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you, of course, with meekness and fear. But what is the reason for the hope that's in me? It is the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Thanks, Jimmy.